Good morning, everybody. Good crack of noon to our friends on the East Coast. I am Todd Obert, President and CEO of Productive, joined with my main man, technically, virtually, emotionally, cyber defensively, Pete Greco, VP of Sales and Technology. Today, we're going to do this thing. We're going to talk about Malwarebytes, and I think some of you may have heard of this product. At least hundreds and hundreds of millions of you have. So we're going to talk about the business version of Malwarebytes. We're going to talk about how it can crush malware, restore confidence, and add defense in depth to your environment. So with that, let's talk about Malwarebytes and why we need it in addition to endpoint security, or how it can help us be more more secure. So to lead that discussion, I'm going to turn the microphone over to our VP of Sales and Technology, Mr. Pete Greco. Let's have a warm virtual round of applause for Pete Greco. Pete?
All right. Thanks so much, Todd, and thanks everybody for hopping on with us. Great question. Why Malwarebytes? Really the main thing that we need to be thinking about is additional layers of security, right? And Chuck and Todd put together some great bullet points here for everybody to take a look at, right? And part of what we're talking about here is efficiency and time effectiveness for IT teams, right? What happens when you have a machine that's been compromised that you're unable to get clean, right? A lot of reimaging, a lot of rebuilding, which is not just time consuming for the IT person who's doing it, but a lot of studies show how long it takes for an end user when they get a machine rebuilt or when they're getting upgraded to a new machine to get their machine back to a state where they feel like they can actually start working. And that includes a lot of stuff that really at the high level seems silly, like getting their wallpaper back, getting their screensaver back, getting the icons and shortcuts arranged on their desktop the way that they like, in their taskbar, getting their pins back in their office programs, all kinds of stuff. And there's a couple studies out there. One says, from Microsoft actually says, takes an end user 2 days to get their PC back to normal. I saw another one that said 3 days. I've seen as long as 4 days. I know I've spent quite a bit of time trying to get that done. And that doesn't include all the time that you spend actually trying to identify what's going on, what's happening, what's not working, why is it not working, why are we having this weird slowdown, all the stuff that runs, that takes you through the gambit of trying to identify why is this machine not running correctly, why am I seeing a lot of overload on the network bandwidth, why is my firewall or UTM going completely crazy, all the stuff that happens out there, right? So part of what we want to do here is add an additional layer of security so that we can pick up where our antivirus leaves off, pick up where things that are not filtering through the UTM, right, are making its way into the network, and that can be via thumb drive or some other kind of USB device. Mobile is going to be the new bastion of attack against the network as folks are bringing those phones in through the front door and then getting them on the Wi-Fi as soon as they arrive at the office, right? And the malware writers, the exploiters, the hackers, all of these guys are looking at the security products that are on the market as the template of what to avoid, right? So as soon as you build a fence, now I have the plans for what not to do, right? Just run straight ahead. I can go under it, I can go over it, I can go around it, I can look for places where it's cracked, right? And that's essentially what these folks are doing. So how does Malwarebytes help you out? Todd, let's take a look at that next slide. There we go. So and this is what we're going to be giving everybody a quick look at here today, right? And so they've got a couple of different modules that can help add that layered approach, create a nice additional layer to your UTM. If you're using, right, a straight firewall, something like this, even more important because you have so much stuff that is just streaming right through that thing that it's not even picking up. Right? You've got your antivirus that is doing intrusion prevention, hopefully doing the search for viruses, right? Might be doing some patch management, which really solves a ton of issues. But part of the challenge that we see is a lot of the exploits that are taking place are actually attacking software and systems where patches have been available to remediate against that for as long as 5 years, right? And it's difficult, I know, to get those patches out there. But that takes care of part of it. And without that, you need a great kind of virtual patch strategy. And that includes upping the protection across the entire environment so that when you're missing that patch, you still have a layered approach to defense to stop what's going on. Now, Malwarebytes is a very popular program. I bet a lot of the folks on this call have used the consumer version or the home version or the free version, right? And what we're talking about here is Malwarebytes Endpoint Security for Business that combines the anti-malware and the anti-exploit, right, into a single management console that's going to give you the capability to get it deployed, but also then get visibility on what it's doing for you, scheduling scans, doing a lot of stuff that you're doing with your antivirus, but now we're more targeting malware exploit kits and non-viral attacks on the environment. So, Todd, should we give everybody a look at this technology?
I'm glad you said that. I'm really looking forward to you know, getting this thing well live and checking it out. You are ready to rock, my friend.
He's very pro. So, Todd, can you see my browser?
Yep.
All right. So let me just pop in. I have this installed on a Server 2008 Hyper-V guest that is also running my Sophos endpoint security console. You can see I've got some agents down at the bottom. I have my anti-exploit for business agent. I've got my anti-malware, Malwarebytes anti-malware. I have my Sophos endpoint agent. I'm running my ArcServe backup agent. Right, and so this machine is doing a lot of double duty. No issues with conflicts. No additional overload on the processor or on the memory footprint when scans are running or anything like that. So really like what we're seeing there. When we first log in, and it can be some role-based login, so we can have a couple different users or multiple users logging in as themselves, if that's something that you're looking for. When we first log in, we're looking at some dashboards and we're getting some information about what's going on in the environment, right? And so we can really very quickly see where there's information that I need to maybe go out and visit an end user and discuss adhering to security policy, or maybe run some scans as double checks to make sure that everything got cleaned in case I see an outbreak or exploits or this kind of stuff. So to get started, I'm just going to jump down to this admin console, and here's where I can plug in my license keys and I can do some basic settings here. In an ongoing way, if maybe I'm sensing that there's new threats out there or there's something going on in my environment, I can go ahead and force some updates and push out signatures instantly if I need to. I have mine set to go every 10 minutes, so already pretty frequent. Probably not something that I would need to do. Here's where I can create my additional logins for my additional folks. Now, to get started, the first thing that I need to do is find my machine. So you can see here, I just did a range for my workstations. They start at 160 and go to 254. Pulled in some boxes here. Now check out Weezer. You see where it says simulation pass. To get started, let's actually just choose a new machine. I can hop up here and I can run a simulation of the install. And this is going to help me identify that the machine is going to be ready for a deployment. And it's going to help me identify that it's got the right OS. You're probably going to know that already in your environment, but it's going to help you identify that you've got the right OS, that there's nothing that's going to stop this thing from happening. And so I can run this. Once it's complete, then I'll see the information here that the simulation is passed. Once I've done that now, I'm ready to deploy, and I can do this to one machine or I can do it to a group of machines. Makes it pretty straightforward. Let me plug in my credentials here. Did I spell that? Okay, looks good. And get my password in there. And then for my client group, now because I've already set this up, I've got a couple of different ways that I can manage machines. This is really very similar to your antivirus where, I set this up as clients and servers. This should be workstations, laptops, servers, or building 1, building 2, however you want to do it, or this kind of employee, that kind of employee. That's all semantics. But when I choose something here, now I can have a different policy that applies to it, and then I can manage it differently. So I've also created a client policy to match my client group. Do I want to create a start menu and desktop icons? Maybe I want this to be a little more secretive from my end user. Maybe I want them to be able to launch and run this. Completely up to me. Do I want to install both components? Highly recommended that you do. Part of the reason that you're looking at this is because you want that additional layer of protection. So let's go whole hog and do it. Once we hit OK, the installation process is going to kick off. And again, I could do all these machines simultaneously if I wanted. Probably need to monitor my network bandwidth pretty quick on the deployment. The package is around 18 meg. Can be pretty quick, especially if you got a fast network to get that pushed out there. Once I have my machines installed, I can hop up to my clients, and you can see the 3 machines that I already have running here. You can see that I've done some scanning here, did one this morning, actually, and if I have any results, I would see those on my dashboards. I can do some remediation. I can just see the workstations if I want to, just see the servers if I want to, right, and again, can create more and more groups with different policies for each group to give me, the capability to manage this and get visibility the way that I want to see it, right?
Hey,
so
Pete.
Yeah.
So along that line, how well does Malwarebytes handle multiple IP ranges?
So are we talking about multiple subnets?
Well, the question is how well does Malwarebytes handle multiple sites, and then in parentheses multiple IP ranges?
Yeah. So if we're talking about managing a couple of different locations and a couple of different networks, right? The one thing that you're going to want to kind of figure out, and we can absolutely strategize with you on this, is what's our connectivity between the 2 locations. If you have a dedicated VPN or connected through some other kind of high-speed dedicated access, managing a remote site from the same console, not a problem at all. If you're in a situation where you're not always connected to that site, that's where you might want to think about setting up a separate management console. Really, a lot of different ways to set it up and configure it, depending on the individual environment. But there's no problem with doing multiple subnets, larger IP ranges, smaller IP ranges. It's going to work for you as long as you're connected and able to control those machines. If you don't have a trust relationship, that's going to be a totally different scenario. But that's where we could set up an alternate management console to work around that, or talk about helping you create some kind of dedicated VPN connection site to site with one of our UTM products. So a couple different ways around that. Okay? Let me know if I'm not answering that question, Todd.
Yeah,
Hopefully
totally.
I am.
Yeah.
So once I'm in here now, I can go ahead and launch a scan. If I want to see some additional information of what's going on, if I want to get a threat view, I can do that and start looking at machines that are having issues. I don't have any issues here, so nothing's popping up. So I'll go back to client view. I'm not a huge fan of clicking on the icons because I have the great habit of right-clicking, learned from my good friend Todd Obert, who's a big right-clicker from the olden times, right? And so I like to do the same thing as well, and I do most of my executions right from here, and a lot of the products that we have on our line card, function in this same way. So one of the things that I really like about this is it really ties in with the way that I've been running my environment and the way that I operate my other software, and makes it real easy to just keep that rolling, right? So now I showed you already where we can go out and check for signatures. I can also go ahead and push out that update. So if I just want to make sure that all my machines have the latest signatures, I can go ahead and do that, and then maybe I want to go ahead and run a deep scan if I feel like something is going on in my environment, right? I have the capability to do that. So how are we scanning? What are we scanning for? What are we looking for? Let's hop down to our policies here, and you can see we've got a default policy that comes out of the box. I always like to keep that around so that I can refer back to that in case I'm having an issue, in case I've made some changes, right? That's my general policy. What you'll see here is this is really pretty straightforward, very easy to set up. Again, I've got some icons up here that can help me start editing, but again, I'm going to be a big right clicker and click right here. Now I can give that policy a name, and there's a lot of tabs, and it really makes it feel like, oh boy, there's a lot here and a lot for me to do. But really a very straightforward setup, right? So what do I want to do when I'm detecting threats? I've really just got some checkboxes here that I want to pay attention to. Warn if the database, that's actually a little high for my taste. I want to bring that down to 2 days, and I can click OK here to accept that, right? Hop over to my protection, and now this is going to tell me when I push this out, I want it to be on, or I have the protection on. I could disable it if I needed to for some kind of testing. Maybe I'm a software developer, and every time I try and compile my code, it thinks that it's an attack, right? So I could do some stuff there. How do I want to deploy this? Do I want to run it in silent mode? How do I want to manage the quarantine? So completely up to you. I'm a big fan of hiding messages on the endpoints. On the servers, I like to see them popping up from my agents here. On the endpoints, I don't like a whole lot of messages popping up. So that's where I might create a couple of different policies here. One where I'm having the balloons pop up, and one where I'm not. Right? Give me some capability there. What do I want to scan? I've got a couple of drop-down options that I can choose here. Do not show in the results list, show in the results list and check for removal, or do not check for removal. I want to be fairly methodical when I'm removing something from a server or automatically cleaning it. On a workstation, right, I'm going to be a little more automated role because I want that stuff to get clean. Worst case scenario, if I had to rebuild a box, not the end of the world, right? On a server, I definitely want to take a more cautious approach and just kind of review stuff before I actually completely delete it out of quarantine. Now I can also schedule. Yeah.
So, so I heard server. I wanted to clarify on that. Kind of a little circling back to the last topic of how to deploy this across multiple sites.
Yeah.
Is this just going to be? Is it going to be one management console that would manage that centrally, or would you, can you have a management console at each location and then that all rolls up to one, or how do you deal with that issue?
Yeah, so a couple different things. My preference obviously would be to have a single management console. You can have management consoles at each location. Right now, they're not going to roll back up into one kind of unified console. So if you needed to put a console at location B, that's going to be independently managed. Now, the good news is, and Todd, I don't like to talk a lot about set it and forget it when it comes to security, but this is a product where you can be a little more set it and forget it. It doesn't need the active management and monitoring that your endpoint security probably needs. You've got some alerts and reports in here so that if something is happening, you can find out about it and hop in. But there's not a whole lot of day-to-day stuff that you need to do in here. Once you get it set up and get it tuned in a little bit, if maybe kind of figured out that you got a couple applications that you want to exclude from scanning and this kind of stuff, it doesn't need a lot of constant babysitting and monitoring. Now, if you're in a high-risk environment and you've got a lot of end users that are bringing in tons and tons of malware and really kind of a high-risk network, you might want to do a little more hand-holding on the product, and across all of your security products, that's probably the case. But for the standard environment, this can be a little more, again, I hate to say forget it, but maybe it's set it and you're checking it out weekly or a couple times a week, not necessarily kind of morning, noon, and night like we're recommending with some of the other security products that really require a lot more active monitoring to see what's going on. Okay?
Okay, so hey, kind of in tandem with that, we got another question asking, can remote users check into a public IP address for policy updates, and then in that way they wouldn't have to, be on a VPN client or somehow connected back to the mothership to get new data?
So you can set it up so that you are checking for new signatures and updates from the management console or from the internet, right? If they're not connected to the network, you're not going to get reports. So if I'm at the coffee shop and I get an exploit that gets cleaned, everything's good, right? The management console is not going to find out about it until I either VPN in or come back into the office. Now, there are some ways that you can set that up, and we have done this for a couple of folks on some of the endpoint security products on our line card, Todd. And what it involves is putting your management console in the DMZ, and we typically don't like to do that. We don't recommend that you do it because it involves punching holes, and anytime you talk about punching holes in security, what I'm hearing is, hey, let's create a workaround to get around our security, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's some of the ways you can solve that, but we would definitely recommend against it, or we would want to talk about maybe a separate firewall with a separate internet connection and some real custom setup done by us and Malwarebytes to help you get that set up and configured correctly. I think for a lot of folks, getting that information, getting those policy changes and that kind of stuff, it's not the same requirement with Malwarebytes that it might be with your antivirus program, where that becomes more important on your standard AV, especially if you're doing application control, especially if you're doing device control, and if you're doing any kind of like DLP or web content control, might need to create whitelists right on the spot. So I'm at a customer site, we can't get through to this website for whatever reason, we need a whitelist. Or I need to be able to plug in a thumb drive to get something installed that I didn't know I was going to need while I'm out of the office. And that's where making some of those changes in your endpoint security product, right, kind of on demand or on the fly that you need to apply quicker, that happens a lot more. You're not going to see that quite as much with the Malwarebytes, where you need to do a quick policy change and you need to get it pushed out. It's really, it's got a fairly defined job of looking for exploits and exploit kits, right, which is where a ton of the malware is originating from. And if you look at a lot of the hacker groups out there, they're all using the same tools that have been developed by a more limited set of hacking groups, right? And that's what we're looking for here. So not quite as broad scale as what your modern endpoint security product is designed to do. And because of that, then, you don't necessarily need that every second constant control and capability to make policy changes like you do with some of your other security products. Okay? So we've got our deep scan scheduled here, right, or on-demand scanner, probably a lot of you folks call it, right? I like to call it the old way because I'm old school. I've got some items that I can ignore that I don't want the Malwarebytes to take a look at. Right, we've already took, or maybe we didn't actually take a look at the updater. Here's where I can control how I'm getting my my downloads. I can do some custom paths here and some good stuff here. And then I can do some controls around my anti-exploit package and create some anti-exploit exclusions here as well. And so, you know, what the anti-exploit piece of this is really doing is it's looking for those exploits and exploit kits to take effect. And a lot of those things are silent. And what a lot of them are doing, right, is taking advantage of a hole in your existing software. And if you're not familiar with some of the recent threats that are really leveraging vulnerabilities in certain code, you should take a look at our YouTube page and check out our recent event featuring an attack on Career Builder, or really Career Builder users. To give you an idea, Malwarebytes is absolutely a product that can help you avoid that Career Builder type attack there. Right, so here's where we can set this up. We've got some shields built in. These are all defaults, and I can add a lot more for the products that we're really going to be shielding, right, or kind of virtual patching against and creating the protection on. So got that set up. We're good to go. When I push out now, I can reference one of the policies that I've created. And as soon as my deployment is done, it's going to go out with the policy intact. I can also create an installation package. So if I have folks that are not on the network, and just recently I've talked to a couple of customers where they have 10, 15, 20 people who never get on the network. So anything that they need, they're posting on an FTP site, or they're emailing them, or they might even be sending them a disk. And so if you have some of those users, you can create an install package complete with your client, and you can publish it on your intranet site that they can download and install at their convenience, or send it to them on a thumb drive, or whatever it is that you need to do. So let's take a look at the agents now. So here's the actual Malwarebytes agent. Right, and you can see I can pop this open and I can do a couple of different things as the end user. Now I can run these scans from the management console, but you can also allow the end user to run scans on their own. Now if you don't want to, you can disable that, and they can't do anything other than have the protection. They're not going to be able to interact with it in any way, but I can go ahead and do a quick scan here if I want. I can see this thing kicking off. I can push or request my updates. And make sure that I have up-to-date information. So if I feel like my machine is running slow, maybe because I've got something going on, or pop-ups are happening, or just weird stuff is happening, maybe I want to run a quick update, make sure I've got the latest stuff. I can check out my quarantine, see if I have anything in my quarantine here. Right, and I can close that out. It'll continue to run. And then if we look at my anti-exploit, really not a lot to this. This is really just running. It runs all the time. It doesn't go out and scan for anything. That's what the Malwarebytes main engine is doing. This is actually just looking for exploits as they're happening and killing them. Again, we've got the shields that we saw in our policy config. Check out any logs. End user's probably not going to know what to do with these. You can see all of these back on your main management console. Right, and then I can create those exclusions here. These need to be created on the management console. An end user cannot create exclusions, or an admin for that matter. Exclusions cannot be created on the agent. They can only be created in the management console, and that's really for everybody's safety, right? We don't want those end users excluding anything that we haven't really identified needs to be excluded. So pretty straightforward. Todd, to get this set up and get a couple agents deployed and get a couple policies built, we were looking at sub 30 minutes to get this rolling. Now, getting it deployed across your entire environment obviously take a little bit more time, but very quick to get this thing started. Very easy to do a trial of and get some sample results and figure out what's going on. On the first server that we launched this on, we found a couple of items in hiding. We couldn't figure out if they'd actually done anything yet. Didn't look like it, but found a couple items in hiding, got them cleaned off, and you know, had a great trial experience.
Hey, Pete, can you show the reporting a little bit, or kind of talk about that?
Oh, of course. Should have done that while we had the management console open, of course. So since we didn't know, we'll go ahead and show you. This is what you're looking like when you log in. And you can load the console. Let's see if I can type the right password. You can load the console locally, right on your local machine, and access the management server from your local box. I'm actually logged onto the management console here. Right? Need to put in our license key. And as far as system requirements, my box is a little underpowered. Like to see 4 gigs of RAM on that. That really helps that management console pop. Our host is a little overwhelmed, so we've only got about 2.5 gigs applied to this thing. If you can crank that RAM up just a smidge, you're really going to like the way that this thing pops and performs. So the report tab here, right? A couple different ways I can run those reports. I can have alerts emailed out to me. I set that up on the admin tab so that if something's happening, I'm getting an email and know what to do here. So I can choose a couple different kinds of reports here, right? And then I can get some different kinds of information. I can also do a range so I can figure out, you know, what amount of time do I want to see this report on. I can print this. I can email it out. A couple different ways I can get the information.
All right, we're running a little past the bottom half of the hour, Pete, so why don't you finish that up and pass me over control. We'll wrap this bad boy up.
All right, sounds good. So, you know, the next thing is your productive rep is going to be following up with you, and they can definitely help you get a custom demo if there was something that I left out. I'm sure there was at least one thing, right? Or if you want to talk a little bit more about your specific environment and how this is going to work for you. Or maybe you're just ready to move into the trial phase. You might already have some great experience with Malwarebytes, didn't know there was a business solution out there, and just need to help to get the trial going. They can help you down that path as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, great presentation as always, Pete, and thank you everybody for coming. We know you have a lot going on in your day. Spending a half an hour with us is a commitment. We truly appreciate it. As Pete mentioned, somebody from Productive is going to follow up. Make sure that you guys have everything you need, that you get your gift cards, and we really appreciate you coming today. We hope everybody has a fantastic balance of your day and week, has a great, safe, fun Labor Day weekend, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks.